All right, we are coming up on 8 o'clock. So let's go ahead and settle in, get comfortable, and get started, shall we? Welcome back. This is our 11th? Yeah, 11 sounds right. Anyway, Three Musketeers. We are back. It seems like it's been a little while. We had the special on Saturday that took up all of Saturday and a fair chunk of Sunday, but we got through the entirety of the Andromeda Strain in a single stream. I was dead on Sunday, as might be imagined. So we are back today to our regular routine as we wonder where we left off. And yeah, each of these breaks feels a little... I think part of it is the longest we go without a stream is usually 2 days, because we do Tuesday, and then we have Wednesday, Thursday off, and then that brings us into the Friday. And so since we had the Sunday and Monday off, it made this feel exceptionally long, especially because the regular routine left off on... yeah, I bet. The regular routine left off on Friday. So we've had 3 days since our last visit with Dumas. So, yeah. But yeah, I'd imagine everyone involved probably had a rough Sunday. I was able to get up and about relatively normally. Got up by like 10, and it was just like, yeah, a few hours of sleep, that's fine. I did not let a word be spoken until like 2 o'clock. Alright, so let's see. I didn't update the drink because we are not feeling boring tonight. Basic maybe, but not boring. Because every once in a while, basic is fine. And sometimes, you have cheap bourbon that you need to get rid of. Yeah, that's a lot of it is... the voices weren't too bad in Andromeda Strain, largely because it was just like... I didn't really settle into a rhythm so much on how to voice the different characters. I did try and have some differentiation there, but for the most part, they were very similar, just slightly different pitches for the guys. Not nearly to the extent that I do for the Three Musketeers. But, yeah, just... narration in general is a lot. Evan Williams, so, I mean, that's about as low as I get. That's my well, which is still respectable. Alright, let's see here. Yeah, Evan Williams is my go-to for, I'm on a budget, but I still want to have some self-respect. No, I don't think that's a controversial opinion at all. That's an informed opinion. Jack is mass market appeal and name recognition, but if you want something that's very similarly in this very similar style, yeah, I think Evan Williams is the go-to. Alright, that's enough banter for tonight, because I don't know about you, I'm rather antsy to get back to our story. So, let's go ahead and jump right back into it from where we left off, and that will be Chapter 44, The Bastion Saint Gervais. This was, as you may remember, just after Athos had his confrontation with Milady, and the Three Musketeers were escorting the Cardinal, of all people, back from his midnight rendezvous with Milady on toward the camp. So there's been a lot of serendipitous meetings that will have portents and consequences as we roll out. On arriving at the lodgings of his three friends, D'Artagnan found them assembled in the same chamber. Athos was meditating, Porthos was twisting his moustache, Aramis was saying his prayers in a charming little book of hours, bound in blue velvet. "Pardieu, gentlemen," said he, I hope what you have to tell me is worth the trouble, or else I warn you, I will not pardon you for making me come here instead of getting a little rest after a night spent in taking and dismantling a bastion. Ah, why were you not there, gentlemen? It was warm work." "We were at a place where it was not very cold," replied Porthos, giving his moustache a twist which was peculiar to him. "Hush," said Athos. Oh, said D'Artagnan, comprehending the slight frown of the Musketeer. "It appears there is something fresh aboard." "Aramis," said Athos, "you went to breakfast the day before yesterday at the inn of the Parpaillot, I believe?" "Yes." "How did you fare?" "For my part, I ate but little. The day before yesterday was a fish day, and they had nothing but meat." "What?" said Athos. "No fish at a seaport?" "They say," said Aramis, resuming his pious reading, "that the dike which the cardinal is making drives them all out into the open sea." "But that is not quite what I mean to ask you, Aramis," replied Athos. "I want to know if you were left alone, and nobody interrupted you." "Why, I think there were not many intruders. Yes, Athos, I know what you mean. We shall do very well at the Parpaillot." "Let us go to the Parpaillot, then, for here the walls are like sheets of paper." D'Artagnan, who was accustomed to his friend's manner of acting, and who perceived immediately by a word, a gesture, or a sign from him that the circumstances were serious, took Athos' arm and went out without saying anything. Porthos followed, chatting with Aramis. On their way, they met Grimaud. Athos made him a sign to come with them. Grimaud, according to custom, obeyed in silence. The poor lad had nearly come to the pass of forgetting how to speak. They arrived at the drinking room of the Parpaillot. It was 7 o'clock in the morning, and daylight began to appear. The three friends ordered breakfast, and went into a room in which the host said they would not be disturbed. Unfortunately, the hour was badly chosen for a private conference. The morning drum had just been beaten. Everyone shook off the drowsiness of night, and to dispel the humid morning air, came to take a drop at the inn. Dragoons, Swiss guardsmen, musketeers, light horsemen succeeded one another with a rapidity which might answer the purpose of the host very well, but agreed badly with the views of the four friends. Thus, they applied very curtly to the salutations, healths, and jokes of their companions. "I see how it will be," said Athos. "We shall get into some pretty quarrel or other, and we have no need of one just now. D'Artagnan, tell us what sort of a night you have had, and we will describe ours afterward." Ah, yes," said a light horseman with a glass of brandy in his hand, which he sipped slowly. "I hear you gentlemen of the guards have been in the trenches tonight, and that you did not get much the best of the Rochellais." D'Artagnan looked at Athos to know if he ought to reply to this intruder, who thus mixed unasked in their conversation. "Well," said Athos, "don't you hear Monsieur de Busigny, who does you the honor to ask you a question? Relate what has passed during the night, since these gentlemen desire to know it." "Have you not taken a bastion?" said a Swiss, who was drinking rum out of a beer glass. "My man, all right." "Yes, monsieur," said D'Artagnan, bowing, "we have had that honor. We even have, as you may have heard, introduced a barrel of powder under one of your angles, which in blowing up made a very pretty breach. Without reckoning that, as the bastion was not built yesterday, all the rest of the building was badly shaken." "And what bastion is it?" asked a dragoon, with his saber run through a goose, which he was taking to be cooked. "The bastion of Saint Gervais," replied D'Artagnan, "from behind which the Rochellais annoyed our workmen." "Was that affair hot?" "Yes, moderately so. We lost 5 men, and the Rochellais 8 or 10. "Bon sang bleu," said the Swiss, who, notwithstanding the admirable collection of oaths possessed by the German language, had acquired a habit of swearing in French. "But it is probable," said the light horseman, "that they will send out pioneers this morning to repair the bastion." "Yes, that's probable," said D'Artagnan. "Gentlemen," said Athos, "a wager." "Ah, oui, a wager," cried the Swiss. "What is it?" said the light horseman. "Stop a bit," said the dragoon, placing his saber like a spit upon the 2 large iron dogs which held the firebrands in the chimney. "Stop a bit, I'm in it. You cursed host, a dripping pan immediately, that I may not lose a drop of the fat of this estimable bird." "You are right," said the Swiss. "Goose grease is good for bastry." "There," said the dragoon. "Now for the wager. We listen, Monsieur Athos." "Yes, the wager," said the light horseman. "Well, Monsieur de Busigny, I will bet you," said Athos, "that my 3 companions, Messieurs Porthos, Aramis, and D'Artagnan, and myself, will go and breakfast in the Bastion Saint-Gervais, and we will remain there an hour, by the watch, whatever the enemy may do to dislodge us." Porthos and Aramis looked at each other. They began to comprehend. "But," said D'Artagnan in the ear of Athos, "you are going to get us all killed without mercy." "We are much more likely to be killed," said Athos, "if we do not go." "My faith, gentlemen," said Porthos, turning round upon his chair and twisting his moustache. "That's a fair bet, I hope." "I take it," said Monsieur de Busigny. "So let us fix the stake." "You are 4 gentlemen," said Athos, "and we are 4. An unlimited dinner for 8. Will that do?" "Capitally," replied Monsieur de Busigny. "Perfectly," said the dragoon. "That shoots me," said the Swiss. The 4th auditor, who during all this conversation had played a mute part, made a sign of the head in proof that he acquiesced to the proposition. "The breakfast for these gentlemen is ready," said the host. "Well, bring it," said Athos. The host obeyed. Athos called Grimaud, pointed to a large basket which lay in a corner, and made a sign to him to wrap the viands up in the napkins. Grimaud understood that it was to be a breakfast on the grass, took the basket, packed up the viands, and added the bottles, and then took the basket on his arm. "But where are you going to eat my breakfast?" asked the host. "What matter, if you are paid for it?" said Athos, and he threw 2 pistoles majestically on the table. "Shall I give you the change, my officer?" said the host. "No, only add 2 bottles of champagne, and the difference will be for the napkins." The host had not quite so good a bargain as he had first hoped for, but he made amends by slipping in 2 bottles of Anjou wine instead of 2 bottles of champagne. "Monsieur de Busigny," said Athos, "will you be so kind as to set your watch with mine, or permit me to regulate mine by yours?" "Which you please, monsieur," said the light horseman, drawing from his fob a very handsome watch, studded with diamonds. 7:30. 35 minutes after 7, said Athos, "by which you perceive I am 5 minutes faster than you." And, bowing to all the astonished persons present, the young men took the road to the Bastion Saint-Gervais, followed by Grimaud, who carried the basket, ignorant of where he was going, but in the passive obedience which Athos had taught him, not even thinking of asking. As long as they were within the circle of the camp, the 4 friends did not exchange one word. Besides, they were followed by the curious, who, hearing of the wager, were anxious to know how they would come out of it. But when once they passed the line of circumvallation, and found themselves in the open plain, D'Artagnan, who was completely ignorant of what was going forward, thought it was time to demand an explanation. "And now, my dear Athos," said he, "do me the kindness to tell me where we are going." "Why, You see plainly enough that we are going to the bastion. But what are we going to do there? You know well that we go to breakfast there. But why did we not have breakfast at the Parpaillot? Because we have a very important matters to communicate to one another, and it was impossible to talk 5 minutes in that inn without being annoyed by all those importunate fellows who keep coming in, saluting you and addressing you. Here, at last, said Athos, pointing to the bastion. They will not come and disturb us. It appears to me, said D'Artagnan, with that prudence which allied itself in him so naturally with excessive bravery, that we could have found some retired place on the downs or the seashore, where we should have been seen all four conferring together, so that at the end of a quarter of an hour the cardinal would have been informed by his spies that we were holding a council. Yes, said Aramis, Athos is right. Anima adventurer tutor in desertis. A desert would have been amiss, said Porthos, but it behooved us to find it. There is no desert where a bird cannot pass over one's head, where a fish cannot leap out of the water, where a rabbit cannot come out of its burrow, and I believe that bird, fish, and rabbit each becomes a spy of the cardinal. Better then pursue our enterprise, from which, besides, we cannot retreat without shame. We have made a wager in which could not have been foreseen, and of which I defy anyone to divine the true cause. We are going in order to win it, to remain an hour in the bastion. Either we shall be attacked or not. If we are not, we shall have all the time to talk, and nobody will hear us, for I guarantee the walls of the bastion have no ears. If we are, we will talk of our affairs just the same. Moreover, in defending ourselves, we shall cover ourselves with glory. You see that everything is to our advantage. Yes, said D'Artagnan, but we shall indubitably attract a ball. Well, my dear, replied Athos, you know well that the balls most to be dreaded are not from the enemy. But for such an expedition, we surely ought to have brought our muskets. That was Porthos, sorry. You are stupid, friend Porthos. Why should we load ourselves with a useless burden? I don't find a good musket, 12 cartridges, and a powder flask very useless in the face of an enemy. Well, replied Athos, have you not heard what D'Artagnan said? What did he say? Demanded Porthos. D'Artagnan said that in the attack of last night 8 or 10 Frenchmen were killed, and as many Rochellais. What then? The bodies were not plundered, were they? It appears the conquerors had something else to do. Well, we shall find their muskets, their cartridges, and their flasks, and instead of 4 musketoons and 12 balls, we shall have 15 guns and 100 charges to fire. Oh, Athos, said Aramis, truly, you are a great man. Porthos nodded in sign of agreement. D'Artagnan alone did not seem convinced. Grimaud, who no doubt shared the misgivings of the young man, for seeing that they continued to advance toward the bastion, something he had till then doubted, he pulled his master by the skirt of his coat. Where are we going? Asked he by a gesture. Athos pointed to the bastion. But, said Grimaud in the same silent dialect, we shall leave our skins there. Athos raised his eyes and his finger toward heaven. Grimaud put his basket on the ground and sat down with a shake of the head. Athos took a pistol from his belt and looked to see if it was properly primed, cocked it, and placed the muzzle close to Grimaud's ear. Grimaud was on his legs again, as if by a spring. Athos then made him a sign to take up his basket and to walk on first. Grimaud obeyed. All that Grimaud gained by this momentary pantomime was to pass from the rear guard to the vanguard. Arrived at the bastion, the 4 friends turned round. More than 300 soldiers of all kinds were assembled at the gate of the camp. and in a separate group might be distinguished by Monsieur de Busigny, the dragoon, the Swiss, and the fourth better. Athos took off his hat, placed it on the end of his sword, and waved it in the air. All the spectators returned him his salute, accompanying this courtesy with a loud hurrah, which was audible to the four, after which all four disappeared into the bastion, whither Grimaud had preceded them. Alright, that brings us to the end of chapter 36. 46. Roman numerals, man. One of those days. Start of the week, I guess. Alright, let's continue now with chapter 47. The Council of the Musketeers. As Athos had foreseen, the bastion was only occupied by a dozen corpses, French and Rochellais. "Gentlemen," said Athos, who had assumed the command of the expedition, while Grimaud spreads the table, "let us begin by collecting the guns and cartridges together. We can talk while performing that necessary task. These gentlemen," added he, pointing to the bodies, "cannot hear us." "But we could throw them in the ditch," said Porthos, "after having assured ourselves they have nothing in their pockets." Yes, said Athos. "That's Grimaud's business." "Well, then," said D'Artagnan, "pray, let Grimaud search them and throw them over the walls." "Heaven forfend," said Athos, "they may serve us." "These bodies serve us," said Porthos. "You are mad, dear friend." "Judge not rashly. Say the gospel and the cardinal," replied Athos. "How many guns, gentlemen?" 12, replied Aramis. "How many shots?" 100. "It's quite as many as we shall want. Let us load the guns." The four musketeers went to work, and as they were loading the last musket, Grimaud announced that the breakfast was ready. Athos replied always by gestures that was well, and indicated to Grimaud, by pointing to a turret that resembled a pepper caster, that he was to stand as sentinel. Only, to alleviate the tediousness of the duty, Athos allowed him to take a loaf, 2 cutlets, and a bottle of wine. "And now to table," said Athos. The four friends seated themselves on the ground with their legs crossed like Turks, or even sailors. "And now," said D'Artagnan, "there is no longer any fear of being overheard. I hope you are going to let me into your secret." "I hope, at the same time, to procure you amusement and glory, gentlemen," said Athos. "I have induced you to take a charming promenade. Here is a delicious breakfast, and yonder are 500 persons, as you may see through the loopholes, taking us for heroes or madmen, 2 classes of imbeciles greatly resembling each other." "But the secret," said D'Artagnan. "The secret is," said Athos, "that I saw Milady last night." D'Artagnan was lifting a glass to his lips, but at the name of Milady, his hand trembled so that he was obliged to put the glass on the ground again, for fear of spilling the contents. "You saw your what—" "Hush!" interrupted Athos. "You forget, my dear, you forget that these gentlemen are not initiated into my family affairs like yourself. I have seen Milady." "Where?" demanded D'Artagnan. "Within 2 leagues of this place, at the inn of the Red Dovecot." "In that case I am lost," said D'Artagnan. "Not so bad yet," replied Athos, "for by this time she must have quit the shores of France." D'Artagnan breathed again. "But after all, who is Milady?" "A charming woman," said Athos, sipping a glass of sparkling wine. "Villainous host!" cried he. "He has given us Anjou wine instead of champagne, and fancies we know no better." "Yes," continued he, "a charming woman, who entertained kind views toward our friend D'Artagnan, who, on his part, had given her some offense for which she tried to revenge herself a month ago by having him killed by 2 musket shots, a week ago by trying to poison him, and yesterday by demanding his head of the cardinal." "What? By demanding my head of the cardinal?" cried D'Artagnan, pale with terror. "Yes, that is as true as the gospel," said Porthos. "I heard her with my own ears." "I also," said Aramis. "Then," said D'Artagnan, letting his arm fall with discouragement, "it is useless to struggle longer. I may as well blow my brains out, and will all be over." "That's the last folly to be committed," said Athos, "seeing it is the only one for which there is no remedy." "But I can never escape," said D'Artagnan. "With such enemies, first my stranger among, then De Ward, to whom I have given the 3 sword wounds, next Milady, whose secret I have discovered, finally the cardinal, whose vengeance I have balked." "Well," said Athos, "that only makes 4, and we are 4, 1 for 1. Pardieu, if we may believe the signs Grimaud is making, we are about to have to do with a very different number of people. What is it, Grimaud? Considering the gravity of the occasion, I permit you to speak, my friend, but be laconic, I beg. What do you see?" "A troop." "Of how many persons?" 20 men. "What sort of men?" 16 pioneers, 4 soldiers. "How far distant?" 500 paces. "Good! We have just time to finish this fowl, and to drink 1 glass of wine to your health, D'Artagnan." "To your health!" repeated Porthos and Aramis. "Well then, to my health, although I am very much afraid that your good wishes will not be of a great service to me." "Bah!" said Athos. "God is great, as say the followers of Mohammed, and the future is in his hands." Then, swallowing the contents of his glass, which he put down close to him, Athos rose carelessly, took the musket next to him, and drew near to one of the loopholes. Porthos, Aramis, and D'Artagnan followed his example. As to Grimaud, he received orders to place himself behind the 4 friends in order to reload their weapons. "Pardieu," said Athos, "it was hardly worthwhile to distribute ourselves for 20 fellows armed with pickaxes, mattocks, and shovels. Grimaud had only to make them a sign to go away, and I am convinced they would have left us in peace." "I doubt that," replied D'Artagnan, "for they are advancing very resolutely. Besides, in addition to the pioneers, there are 4 soldiers and a brigadier, armed with muskets." "That's because they don't see us," said Athos. "My faith! I must confess I feel a great repugnance to fire on these poor devils of civilians." "He's a bad priest," said Porthos, "who has pity for heretics." "In truth," said Athos, "Aramis is right. I will warn them." "What the devil are you going to do?" cried D'Artagnan. "You will be shot." But Athos heeded not his advice. Mounting on the breach with his musket in one hand and his hat in the other, he said, bowing courteously, and addressing the soldiers and the pioneers, who, astonished at this apparition, stopped 50 paces from the bastion, "Gentlemen, a few friends and myself are about to breakfast in this bastion. Now, you know nothing is more disagreeable than being disturbed when one is at breakfast. We request you, then, if you really have business here, to wait until we have finished our repast, or to come again a short time hence, unless, which would be far better, you form the salutary resolution to quit the side of the rebels, and come and drink with us to the health of the King of France." "Take care, Athos," cried D'Artagnan. "Don't you see they're aiming?" Yes, said Athos, "but they are only civilians, very bad marksmen, who will be sure not to hit me." In fact, at the very same instant, 4 shots were fired, and the balls were flattened against the wall around Athos, but not one touched him. 4 shots replied to them almost instantaneously, but much better aimed than those of the aggressors. 3 soldiers fell dead, and one of the pioneers was wounded. "Grimaud," said Athos, still on the breach, "another musket." Grimaud immediately obeyed. On their part, the 3 friends had reloaded their arms, A second discharge followed the first. The brigadier and 2 pioneers fell dead. The rest of the troop took to flight. "Now, gentlemen, a sortie!" cried Athos. And the 4 friends rushed out of the fort, gained the field of battle, picked up the 4 muskets of the privates and the half-pike of the brigadier, and convinced that the fugitives would not stop till they reached the city, turned again toward the bastion, bearing with them the trophies of their victory. "Reload the muskets, Grimaud," said Athos, "and we, gentlemen, will go on with our breakfast, and resume our conversation. Where were we?" "I recollect you were saying," said D'Artagnan, "that after having demanded my head of the cardinal, Milady had quit the shores of France. Whither goes she?" added he, strongly interested in the route Milady followed. "She goes into England," said Athos. "With what view?" "With the view of assassinating, or causing to be assassinated, the Duke of Buckingham." D'Artagnan uttered an exclamation of surprise and indignation. "But this is infamous!" cried he. "As to that," said Athos, "I beg you to believe that I care very little about it. Now you have done, Grimaud. Take our brigadier's half-pike, tie a napkin to it, and plant it on top of our bastion, that these rebels of Rochely may see that they have to deal with brave and loyal soldiers of the king." Grimaud obeyed without replying. An instant afterward, the white flag was floating over the heads of the 4 friends. A thunder of applause saluted its appearance. Half the camp was at the barrier. "How?" replied D'Artagnan. "You care little if she kills Buckingham or causes him to be killed. But the Duke is our friend." "The Duke is English. The Duke fights against us. Let her do what she likes with the Duke. I care no more about him than an empty bottle." And Athos threw 15 paces away from him an empty bottle, from which he had poured the last drop into his glass. "A moment," said D'Artagnan. "I will not abandon Buckingham thus. He gave us some very fine horses." "And, moreover, very handsome saddles," said Porthos, who at the moment wore on his cloak the lace of his own. "Besides," said Aramis, "God desires the conversion and not the death of a sinner." "Amen," said Athos, "and we will return to that subject later, if such be your pleasure. But what for the moment engaged my attention most earnestly, and that I am sure you will understand me, D'Artagnan, was the getting from this woman a kind of carte blanche, which she had extorted from the cardinal, and by means of which she could with impunity get rid of you and, perhaps, of us." "This creature must be a demon," said Porthos, holding out his plate to Aramis, who was cutting up a fowl. "And this carte blanche," said D'Artagnan, "this carte blanche, does it remain in her hands?" "No, it has passed into mine. I will not say without trouble, for if I did, I should tell a lie." "My dear Athos, I shall no longer count the number of times I am indebted to you for my life." "Then it was to go to her that you left us," said Aramis. "Exactly." "And you have that letter of the cardinal?" said D'Artagnan. "Here it is," said Athos, and he took the invaluable paper from the pocket of his uniform. D'Artagnan unfolded it with one hand, whose trembling he did not even attempt to conceal, to read, "December 3rd, 1627. It is by my order, and for the good of the state, that the bearer of this has done what he has done. Richelieu." "In fact," said Aramis, "it is an absolution, according to rule." That paper must be torn to pieces," said D'Artagnan, who fancied he read in it his sentence of death. Hang on 1 second. There is a fly or something flying around here, and Zoe is about to knock off something. She's about to clear off the desk. So I'm going to need a moment to try and shoo this thing away. Alright, I think we got him. This was that big old fly. It was like a horsefly or something, but I was buzzing around, thought it was like a beetle or a bee or something, but gave it a good slap with a piece of mail, and I think Zoe got the end of it. But she was all up and about it. I was not wanting her jumping around the desk with open drinks on the desk while she was hunting the fly. I will let her be a mighty huntress, but not in and around me. Alright, let's resume where we were. That was... let's see. That paper must be torn to pieces, said D'Artagnan, who fancied he read in it his sentence of death. On the contrary, said Athos, it must be preserved carefully. Oh, god damn it. Hang on. Flies back. Thought we got it. Did not. Stunned it. Alright. Well, we'll hopefully be done with the fly for now. We can only hope. This darn weather is so hot and humid, things are just getting in. Anyway, so... on the contrary, said Athos, it must be preserved carefully. I would not give up this paper if covered with as many gold pieces. Oh, answer the worst. I have work come by pretty regularly to make sure we don't get those, but that's about my limit. I don't mind spiders being around. I don't mind centipedes and whatnot because they get rid of the annoying stuff, as long as they stay out of their sight. But ants, I will not abide. And what will she do now? Asked the young man. Why, replied Athos carelessly, she is probably going to write to the cardinal that a damn musketeer named Athos has taken her safe conduct from her by force. She will advise him in the same letter to get rid of his two friends, Aramis and Porthos, at the same time. The cardinal will remember that these are the same men who have often crossed his path. And then some fine morning he will arrest D'Artagnan, and, for fear he should feel lonely, he will send us to keep him company in the Bastille. Go to. It appears to me you make dull jokes, my dear, said Porthos. I do not jest, said Athos. Do you know, said Porthos, that to twist that damn milady's neck... Ooh, sorry. Would have been a smaller sin than to twist those of the poor devils of Huguenots, who have committed no other crime than sing in French the psalms we sing in Latin. What says the abbé? Asked Athos quietly. I say, I am entirely of Porthos's opinion, replied Aramis. And I too, said D'Artagnan. Fortunately, she is far off, said Porthos, for I confess, she would worry me if she were here. She worries me in England as well as in France, said Athos. She worries me everywhere, said D'Artagnan. But when you held her in your power, why did you not drown her, strangle her, hang her, said Porthos. It is only the dead who do not return. You think so, Porthos? Replied the Musketeer with a sad smile which D'Artagnan alone understood. I have an idea, said D'Artagnan. What is it? Said the Musketeers. To arms, cried Grimaud. The young men sprang up and seized their muskets. This time, a small troop advanced, consisting of from 20 to 25 men, but they were not pioneers. They were soldiers of the garrison. Shall we return to the camp? Said Porthos. I don't think the sides are equal. Impossible, for 3 reasons, replied Athos. The first, that we have not finished breakfast. The second, that we still have some very important things to say. And the third, that it yet wants 10 minutes before the lapse of the hour. Well then, said Aramis, we must form a plan of battle. That's very simple, replied Athos. As soon as the enemy are within musket shot, we must fire upon them. If they continue to advance, we must fire again. We must fire as long as we have loaded guns. If those who remain of the troop persist in coming to the assault, we will allow the besiegers to get as far as the ditch. Then we will push down upon their heads that strip of wall which keeps it perpendicular by a miracle. Bravo, said Porthos. Decidedly, Athos. You were born to be a general, and the cardinal, who fancies himself a great soldier, is nothing beside you. Gentlemen, said Athos, no divided attention, I beg. Let each one pick out his man. I cover mine, said D'Artagnan, and I mine. And I idem, said Aramis. Fire then, said Athos. 4 musketeers made but one report. 4 men fell. The drum immediately beat, and the little troop advanced at charging pace. Then the shots were repeated without regularity, but always aimed with the same accuracy. Nevertheless, as if they had been aware of the numerical weakness of the friends, the Rochellais continued to advance in quick time. With every 3 shots, at least 2 men fell, but the march of those who remained was not slackened. Arrived at the foot of the bastion, there were still more than a dozen of the enemy. A last discharge welcomed them, but did not stop them. They jumped into the ditch and prepared to scale the breach. Now, my friends, said Athos, finish them at a blow. To the wall! To the wall! And the 4 friends, seconded by Grimaud, pushed with the barrels of their muskets an enormous sheet of the wall, which bent as if pushed by the wind, and, detaching itself from its base, fell with a horrible crash into the ditch. Then a fearful crash was heard, a cloud of dust mounted toward the sky, and all was over. Can we destroy them all, from the first to the last? Said Athos. My faith, it appears so, said D'Artagnan. No, cried Porthos. There go 3 or 4, limping away. In fact, 3 or 4 of these unfortunate men, covered with dirt and blood, fled along the hollow way, and at length regained the city. These were all who were left of the little troop. Athos looked at his watch. Gentlemen, said he, we have been here an hour, and our wager is won. But we will be fair players. Besides, D'Artagnan has not told us his idea yet. And the Musketeer, with his usual coolness, reseated himself for the remains of the breakfast. My idea? Said D'Artagnan. Yes, you said you had an idea, said Athos. Oh, I remember, said D'Artagnan. Well, I will go to England a second time. I will go and find Buckingham. You shall not do that, D'Artagnan, said Athos coolly. And why not? Have I not been there once? Yes, but at that period we were not at war. At that period, Buckingham was an ally, and not an enemy. What you would now do, amounts to treason. D'Artagnan perceived the force of this reasoning, and was silent. But, said Porthos, I think I have an idea. In my turn. Silence, for Monsieur Porthos's idea, said Aramis. I will ask leave of absence of Monsieur de Treville, on some pretext or other, which you must invent. I am not very clever at pretexts. Milady does not know me. I will get access to her without her suspecting me, and when I catch my beauty, I will strangle her. Well, replied Athos, I am not far from approving the idea of Monsieur Porthos. For shame, said Aramis. Kill a woman? No, listen to me. I have the true idea. Let us see your idea, Aramis, said Athos, who felt much deference for the young musketeer. We must inform the queen. Ah, my faith, yes, said Porthos and D'Artagnan at the same time. We are coming nearer to it now. Inform the queen, said Athos. And how? Have we relations with the court? Could we send anyone to Paris without its being known in the camp? From here to Paris is 140 leagues. Before our letter was at Angers, we should be in a dungeon. As to remitting a letter with safety to Her Majesty, said Aramis, coloring, I will take that upon myself. I know a clever person at Tours. Aramis stopped on seeing Athos smile. Well, do you not adopt this means, Athos? Said D'Artagnan. I do not reject it altogether, said Athos, but I wish to remind Aramis that he cannot quit the camp, and that nobody but one of ourselves is trustworthy. And that 2 hours after the messenger set out, all the Capuchins, all the police, all the black caps of the cardinal will know your letter by heart, and you and your clever person will be arrested. Without reckoning, objected Porthos, that the queen would save Monsieur de Buckingham, but would take no heed of us. Gentlemen, said D'Artagnan, what Porthos says is full of sense. Ah! But what's going on in the city yonder? Said Athos. They're beating the general alarm. The four friends listened, and the sound of the drum plainly reached them. You see, they are going to send a whole regiment against us, said Athos. You don't think of holding out against a whole regiment, do you? Said Porthos. Why not? Said the musketeer. I feel myself quite in a humor for it, and I would hold out before an army if we had taken the precaution to bring a dozen more bottles of wine. Upon my word, the drum draws near, said D'Artagnan. Let it come, said Athos. It is a quarter of an hour's journey from here to the city. Consequently, a quarter of an hour's journey from the city to hither. That is more than enough time for us to devise a plan. If we go from this place, we shall never find another so suitable. Oh, stop! I have it, gentlemen. The right idea has just occurred to me. Tell us. Allow me to give Grimaud some indispensable orders. Athos made a sign for his lackey to approach. Grimaud, said Athos, pointing to the bodies which lay under the wall of the bastion. Take those gentlemen, set them up against the wall, put their hats upon their heads, and their guns in their hands. Oh, great man, cried D'Artagnan, I comprehend now. You comprehend, said Porthos. And do you comprehend, Grimaud? Said Aramis. Grimaud made a sign in the affirmative. That's all that is necessary, said Athos. Now, for my idea. I should like, however, to comprehend, said Porthos. That is useless. Yes, Athos's idea, cried Aramis and D'Artagnan at the same time. This milady, this woman, this creature, this demon, has a brother-in-law, as I think you told me, D'Artagnan. Yes, I know him very well, and I also believe that he has not a very warm affection for his sister-in-law. There is no harm in that. If he detested her, it would be all the better, replied Athos. In that case, we are as well off as we wish. And yet, said Porthos, I would like to know what Grimaud is about. Silence, Porthos, said Aramis. What is her brother-in-law's name? Lord de Winter. Where is he now? He returned to London at the first sound of war. Well, there's just the man we want, said Athos. It is he whom we must warn. We will have him informed that his sister-in-law is on the point of having someone assassinated, and beg him not to lose sight of her. There is, in London, I hope, some establishment like that of the Magdalenes, or of the Repentant Daughters. He must place his sister in one of these, and we shall be in peace. Yes, said D'Artagnan, till she comes out. Ah, my faith, said Athos, you require too much, D'Artagnan. I have given you all I have, and I beg leave to tell you that this is the bottom of my sack. But I think it would be still better, said Aramis, to inform the Queen and Lord de Winter at the same time. Yes, but who is to carry the letter to Tours, and who to London? I answer for Bazin, said Aramis, and I for Planchet, said D'Artagnan. Aye, said Porthos. If we cannot leave the camp, our lackeys may. To be sure they may, and this very day we will write the letters, said Aramis. Give the lackeys money, and they will start. We will give them money, replied Athos. Have you any money? The four friends looked at one another, and a cloud came over their brows which, but lately, had been so cheerful. Look out! Cried D'Artagnan. I see black points and red points moving yonder. Why did you talk of a regiment, Athos? It is a veritable army. My faith, yes. There they are. So the sneaks come, without drum or trumpet. Aha! Have you finished, Grimaud? Grimaud made a sign in the affirmative, and pointed to a dozen bodies, which he had set up in the most picturesque attitudes. Some carried arms, others seemed to be taking aim, and the remainder appeared merely to be sword in hand. Bravo, said Athos. That does honor to your imagination. All very well, but I should like to understand, said Porthos. Let us decamp first, and you will understand afterward. A moment, gentlemen, a moment. Give Grimaud time to clear away the breakfast. Ah, said Aramis. The black points and the red points are visibly enlarging. I am of D'Artagnan's opinion. We have no time to lose in regaining our camp. My faith, said Athos. I have nothing to say against retreat. We bet upon 1 hour, and we have stayed an hour and a half, and nothing can be said. Let us be off, gentlemen. Let us be off. Grimaud was already ahead, with the basket and the dessert. The four friends followed 10 paces behind him. What the devil shall we do now, gentlemen? Have you forgotten anything? Said Aramis. The white flag, morbleu! We must not leave a flag in the hands of the enemy, even if that flag be but a napkin. And Athos ran back to the bastion, mounted the platform, bore off the flag, but as the Rochellais had arrived within musket range, they opened a terrible fire upon this man, who appeared to expose himself for pleasure's sake. But Athos might be said to bear a charmed life. The balls passed and whistled all around him. Not one struck him. Athos waved his flag, turning his back on the guards of the city and saluting those of the camp. On both sides, loud cries arose. On the one side, cries of anger, and on the other, cries of enthusiasm. A second discharge followed the first, and 3 balls, by passing through it, made the napkin really a flag. Cries were heard from the camp, "Come down! Come down!" Athos came down. His friends, who anxiously awaited him, saw him returned with joy. "Come along, Athos, come along," cried D'Artagnan. "Now we have found everything except money. It would be stupid to be killed." But Athos continued to march majestically, whatever remarks his companions made, and they, finding their remarks useless, regulated their pace by his. Grimaud and his basket were far in advance, out of the range of the balls. At the end of an instant, they heard a furious fusillade. "What's that?" asked Porthos. "What are they firing at now? I hear no balls whistle, and I see nobody." "They are firing at the corpses," replied Athos. "But the dead cannot return their fire." "Certainly not. They will then fancy it is an ambuscade. They will deliberate, and by the time they have found out the pleasantry, we shall be on the range of their balls. That renders it useless to get a pleurisy by too much haste. Oh, I comprehend now, said the astonished Porthos. That's lucky, said Athos, shrugging his shoulders. On their part, the French, on seeing the four friends return at such a step, uttered cries of enthusiasm. At length, a fresh discharge was heard, and this time the balls came rattling among the stones around the four friends, and whistling sharply in their ears. The Rochellais had at last taken possession of the bastion. These Rochellais are bungling fellows, said Athos. How many have we killed of them? A dozen? Or 15? How many did we crush under the wall? 8 or 10. And in exchange for all that, not even a scratch. Ah, what is the matter with your hand, D'Artagnan? It bleeds, seemingly. Oh, it's nothing, said D'Artagnan. A spent ball. Not even that. What is it, then? We have said that Athos loved D'Artagnan like a child, and this somber and inflexible personage felt the anxiety of a parent for the young man. Only grazed a little, replied D'Artagnan. My fingers were caught between two stones, that of the wall and that of my ring, and the skin was broken. That comes of wearing diamonds, my master, said Athos disdainfully. Ah, to be sure, cried Porthos, there is a diamond. Why the devil, then, do we plague ourselves about money when there is a diamond? Stop a bit, said Aramis. Well thought of, Porthos. This time you have an idea. Undoubtedly, said Porthos, drawing himself up at Athos' compliment. As there is a diamond, let us sell it. But, said D'Artagnan, it is the Queen's diamond. The stronger reason why it should be sold, replied Athos. The Queen saving Monsieur de Buckingham, her lover, nothing more just. The Queen saving us, her friends, nothing more moral. Let us sell the diamond. What say Monsieur the Abbé? Don't ask Porthos, his opinion has been given. Why, I think, said Aramis, blushing as usual, that his ring, not coming from a mistress, and consequently not being a love token, D'Artagnan may sell it. My dear Aramis, you speak like theology personified. Your advice, then, is to sell the diamond, replied Aramis. Well, then, said D'Artagnan gaily, let us sell the diamond, and say no more about it. The fusillade continued, but the four friends were out of reach, and the Rochellais only fired to appease their consciences. My faith, it was time that idea came into Porthos' head. Here we are at the camp. Therefore, gentlemen, not a word more of this affair. We are observed. They are coming to meet us. We shall be carried in triumph. In fact, as we have said, the whole camp was in motion. More than 2,000 persons had assisted, as at a spectacle, in this fortunate but wild undertaking of the four friends, an undertaking of which they were far from suspecting the real motive. Nothing was heard but cries of, "Live the Musketeers! Live the Guards!" Monsieur de Busigny was the first to come and shake Athos by the hand, and acknowledge that the wager was lost. The dragoon and the Swiss followed him, and all their comrades followed the dragoon and the Swiss. There was nothing but felicitations, pressures of the hand, and embraces. There was no end to the inextinguishable laughter at the Rochellais. The tumult at length became so great that the cardinal fancied there must be some riot, and sent La Houdinière, his captain of the guards, to inquire what was going on. The affair was described to the messenger with all the effervescence of enthusiasm. "Well?" asked the cardinal, on seeing La Houdinière return. "Well, monseigneur," replied the latter, "the Three Musketeers and a guardsman laid a wager with Monsieur de Busigny that they would go and breakfast at the Bastion Saint-Gervais, and while breakfasting they held it for 2 hours against the enemy, and have killed I don't know how many Rochellais." "Did you inquire the names of those Three Musketeers?" "Yes, monseigneur." "What are their names?" "Messieurs Athos, Porthos, and Aramis." Still, my three brave fellows, remember the cardinal, and the guardsman. D'Artagnan, still my young scapegrace. Positively, these 4 men must be on my side. The same evening, the cardinal spoke to Monsieur de Treville of the exploit of the morning, which was the talk of the whole camp. Monsieur de Treville, who had received the account of the adventure from the mouths of the heroes of it, related it in all its details to his eminence, not forgetting the episode of the napkin. "That's well, Monsieur de Treville," said the cardinal. "Pray, let that napkin be sent to me. I will have 3 fleurs-de-lis embroidered on it in gold, and will give it to your company as a standard." "Monseigneur," said Monsieur de Treville, "that will be unjust to the guardsman. Monsieur d'Artagnan is not with me. He serves under Monsieur Dessart." "Well then, take him," said the cardinal. "When 4 men are so much attached to one another, it is only fair that they should serve in the same company." That same evening, Monsieur de Treville announced this good news to the 3 Musketeers and D'Artagnan, inviting all 4 to breakfast with him next morning. D'Artagnan was beside himself with joy. We know that the dream of his life had been to become a musketeer. The 3 friends were likewise greatly delighted. "My faith," said D'Artagnan to Athos, "you had a triumphant idea. As you said, we have acquired glory, and were enabled to carry on a conversation of the highest importance, which we can resume now, without anybody suspecting us, for, with the help of God, we shall henceforth pass for cardinalists." That evening, D'Artagnan went to present his respects to Monsieur Dessart and inform him of his promotion. Monsieur Dessart, who esteemed D'Artagnan, made him offers of help, as this change would entail expenses for equipment. D'Artagnan refused, but, thinking the opportunity a good one, he begged him to have the diamond he put into his hand valued, as he wished to turn it into money. The next day, Monsieur Dessart's valet came to D'Artagnan's lodging, and gave him a bag containing 7,000 livres. This was the price of the Queen's diamond. That's quite a bit, actually. Wow. All right, that brings us to the end of chapter 47. And after all the fuss with the fly, I'm going to need a couple minutes. Go ahead and we'll take our regular break here. We will top up our drinks, stretch our legs. I will make sure that the unwelcome visitor is gone from my office. And we'll be back in just a little while, where we will continue with the Three Musketeers. All right, we are back. I do think that either Zoe has gotten the fly, or I stunned it or something and it got it with the mail. One way or the other, it's not buzzing around, and Zoe hasn't been ravaging my desk. So, I think we'll call this one a win. The trick is, it's always a question of how they managed to even get in. It's been so hot, I haven't opened the windows or anything for weeks. So, probably just slides in as I open the door or something to come in myself. Always the way of it. Sneaky little shits. Alright, so that was a doozy of a chapter last time. A nice... Honestly, it paints a pretty great image. The four of them trying to have breakfast in the middle of a captured fort. And while the Allied camp is on one side, the enemy camp is on the other. And they're just having breakfast and talking. And as soon as someone tries to come up and take the castle, like, oh, hold up, gotta fight. Sit back down and finish the breakfast. So it's like, alright. I bet that I am almost positive that this has been featured in at least some of the adaptations. There's no way it wouldn't have. It feels like something straight out of a cartoon, honestly. So, peak right there. Alright, so let's continue now. We've got, well, we're almost at the 3/4 mark. We're making very good progress through this book now. So, let's continue now with chapter 48, A Family Affair. Athos had invented the phrase family affair. A family affair was not subject to the investigation of the cardinal. A family affair concerned nobody. People might employ themselves in a family affair before all the world. Therefore, Athos had invented the phrase family affair. Aramis had discovered the idea, the lackeys. Porthos had discovered the means, the diamond. D'Artagnan alone had discovered nothing. He, ordinarily the most inventive of the four, but it must also be said that the very name of Milady paralyzed him. Ah, no, we were mistaken. He had discovered a purchaser for his diamond. The breakfast at Monsieur de Treville's was as gay and cheerful as possible. D'Artagnan already wore his uniform, for being nearly of the same size as Aramis, and as Aramis was so liberally paid by the publisher who purchased his poem as to allow him to buy everything double, he sold his friend a complete outfit. D'Artagnan would have been at the height of his wishes if he had not constantly seen Milady like a dark cloud hovering in the horizon. After breakfast, it was agreed that they should meet again in the evening at Athos's lodging, and there finish their plans. D'Artagnan passed the day in exhibiting his musketeer's uniform in every street of the camp. In the evening, at the appointed hour, the four friends met. There only remained three things to decide. What they should write to Milady's brother, what they should write to the clever person at Tours, and which should be the lackeys to carry the letters. Everyone offered his own. Athos talked of the discretion of Grimaud, who never spoke a word but when his master unlocked his mouth. Porthos boasted of the strength of Mousqueton, who was big enough to thrash 4 men of ordinary size. Aramis, confiding in the address of Bazin, made a pompous eulogism on his candidate. Finally, D'Artagnan had entire faith in the bravery of Planchet, and reminded them of the manner in which he had conducted himself in the ticklish affair in Boulogne. These 4 virtues disputed the prize for a length of time, and gave birth to magnificent speeches which we do not repeat here, for fear they should be deemed too long. Oh yeah, sure, Dumas, sure. Unfortunately, said Athos, he whom we send must possess in himself alone the 4 qualities united: But where is such a lackey to be found? Not to be found. I know it well. So take Grimaud, take Mousqueton, take Boson, take Planchet. Planchet is brave and shrewd. There are 2 qualities out of the 4. Gentlemen, said Aramis, the principal question is not to know which of our 4 lackeys is the most discreet, the most strong, the most clever, or the most brave. The principal thing is to know which loves money the best. You know what, I will absolutely admit to having pulled the same trick myself sometimes. Like, oh, a little bit of a colorful phrase, and that's enough to be like, yeah, there's a lot going on behind the curtain that we won't peek into right now. It's a useful trick. What Aramis says is very sensible, replied Athos. We must speculate upon the faults of people, and not upon their virtues. Monsieur Abbe, you are a great moralist. Doubtless, said Aramis, for we not only require to be well served in order to succeed, but moreover, not to fail. For in case of failure, heads are in question, not for our lackeys. Speak lower, Aramis, said Athos. That's wise. Not for the lackeys, resumed Aramis, but for the master. For the masters, we may say. Are our lackeys sufficiently devoted to us to risk their lives for us? No. My faith, said D'Artagnan. I would almost answer for Planchet. Well, my dear friend, add to his natural devotedness a good sum of money, and then, instead of answering for him once, answer for him twice. Why, good God, you will be deceived just the same, said Athos, who was an optimist when things were concerned, and a pessimist when men were in question. They will promise everything for the sake of the money, and on the road, fear will prevent them from acting. Once taken, they will be pressed. When pressed, they will confess everything. What the devil? We are not children. To reach England, Athos lowered his voice, all France, covered with spies and creatures of the cardinal, must be crossed. A passport for embarkation must be obtained, and the party must be acquainted with English in order to ask the way to London. Really, I think the thing very difficult. Not at all, cried D'Artagnan, who was anxious the matter should be accomplished. On the contrary, I think it very easy. It would be, no doubt, parbleu, if we write to Lord Winter about affairs of vast importance, of the horrors of the cardinal. Speak lower, said Athos. Of intrigues and secrets of state, continued D'Artagnan, complying with the recommendation. There can be no doubt we would all be broken on the wheel. But for God's sake, do not forget, as you yourself said, Athos, that we only write to him concerning a family affair. That we only write to him to entreat that as soon as Milady arrives in London, he will put it out of her power to injure us. I will write to him, then, nearly in these terms. Let us see, said Athos, assuming in advance a critical look. Monsieur and dear friend. Ah, yes, dear friend to an Englishman, interrupted Athos. Well commenced. Bravo, D'Artagnan. Only with that word you would be quartered instead of being broken on the wheel. Well, perhaps I will then say Monsieur, quite short. You may even say my lord, replied Athos, who stickled for propriety. My lord, do you remember the little goat pasture of the Luxembourg? Good, the Luxembourg. One might believe this is an allusion to the Queen Mother. That's ingenious, said Athos. Well, then, we will put simply, my lord, do you remember a certain little enclosure where your life was spared? My dear D'Artagnan, you will never make anything but a very bad secretary. Where your life was spared? For shame, that's unworthy. A man of spirit is not to be reminded of such services. A benefit reproached is an offense committed. The devil, said D'Artagnan, you are insupportable. If the letter must be written under your censure, my faith, I renounce the task. And you will do right. Handle the musket and the sword, my dear fellow. You will come off splendidly at those 2 exercises, but pass the pen over to Monsieur Abbe. That's his province. Aye, aye, said Porthos. Pass the pen to Aramis, who writes theses in Latin. Well, so be it, said D'Artagnan. Draw up this note for us, Aramis, but by our holy father the Pope, cut it short, for I shall prune you in my turn, I warn you. I ask no better, said Aramis, with that ingenious air of confidence which every poet has in himself. But let me be properly acquainted with the subject. I have heard, here and there, that this sister-in-law was a hussy. I have obtained proof of it by listening to her conversation with the cardinal. Lower, sacre bleu, said Athos. But, continued Aramis, the details escape me. And me also, said Porthos. D'Artagnan and Athos looked at each other for some time in silence. At length, Athos, after serious reflection, and becoming more pale than usual, made a sign of assent to D'Artagnan, who, by it, understood he was at liberty to speak. Well, this is what you have to say, said D'Artagnan. My lord, your sister-in-law is an infamous woman who wished to have you killed that she might inherit your wealth. She could not marry your brother, being already married in France, and having been... D'Artagnan stopped as if seeking for the word and looked at Athos. Repudiated by her husband, said Athos, because she had been branded, continued D'Artagnan. Bah! cried Porthos. Impossible! What do you say, that she wanted to have her brother-in-law killed? Yes. She was married? Asked Aramis. Yes. Her husband found out that she had a fleur-de-lis on her shoulder, cried Porthos. Yes. These three yeses had been pronounced by Athos, each with a sadder intonation. And who has seen this fleur-de-lis? Inquired Aramis. D'Artagnan and I, or rather, to observe the chronological order, I and D'Artagnan, replied Athos. And does the husband of this frightful creature still live? Said Aramis. He still lives. Are you quite sure of it? I am he. There was a moment of cold silence, during which everyone was affected according to his nature. This time, said Athos, first breaking the silence, D'Artagnan has given us an excellent program, and the letter must be written at once. The devil! You are right, Athos, said Aramis, and it is a rather difficult matter. The Chancellor himself would be puzzled how to write such a letter, and yet the Chancellor draws up an official report very readily. Never mind, be silent, I will write. Aramis, accordingly, took the quill, reflected for a few moments, wrote 8 or 10 lines in a charming little female hand, and then, with a voice soft and low and slow, as if each word had been scrupulously weighed, he read the following. My lord, the person who writes these few lines had the honor of crossing swords with you in the little enclosure of the Rue d'Enfer. As you have several times since declared yourself the friend of that person, he thinks it his duty to respond to that friendship by sending you important information. Twice you have nearly been the victim of a near relative, whom you believe to be your heir, because you are ignorant that before she contracted a marriage in England, she was already married in France. But the third time, which is the present you may succumb, your relative left La Rochelle for England during the night. Watch her arrival. She has great and terrible projects. If you require to know positively what she is capable of, read her past history on her left shoulder. Well, now that will do wonderfully well, said Athos. My dear Aramis, you have the pen of a Secretary of State. Lord de Winter will now be upon his guard if the letter should reach him, and even if it should fall into the hands of the cardinal, we shall not be compromised. But as the lackey who goes may make us believe he has been to London and may stop at Châtellerault, let us give him only half the sum promised him, with the letter, with an agreement that he shall have the other half in exchange for the reply. Have you the diamond? Continued Athos. I have what is still better. I have the price. And D'Artagnan threw the bag upon the table. At the sound of the gold, Aramis raised his eyes, and Porthos started. As to Athos, he remained unmoved. How much is in that little bag? 7,000 livres, in louis of 12 francs. 7,000 livres! That poor little diamond was worth 7,000 livres. It appears so, said Athos. Since here they are, I don't suppose that our friend D'Artagnan has added any of his own to the amount. But, gentlemen, in all this, said D'Artagnan, we do not think of the queen. Let us take some heed of the welfare of her dear Buckingham. That is the least we owe her. That's true, said Athos, but that concerns Aramis. Well, replied the latter, blushing, what must I say? Oh, that's simple enough, replied Athos. Write a second letter for that clever personage who lives at Tours. Aramis resumed his pen, reflected a little, and wrote the following lines, which he immediately submitted to the approbation of his friends. My dear cousin. Ah, ha ha, said Athos. This clever person is your relative, then. Cousin German. Go on, to your cousin, then. Aramis continued. My dear cousin, His Eminence the Cardinal, whom God preserve for the happiness of France and the confusion of the enemies of the kingdom, is on the point of putting an end to the hectic rebellion of La Rochelle. It is probable that the succor of the English fleet will never even arrive in sight of the place. I will even venture to say that I am certain Monsieur de Buckingham will be prevented from setting out by some great event. His Eminence is the most illustrious politician of times past, of times present, and probably of times to come. He would extinguish the sun if the sun incommoded him. Give these happy tidings to your sister, my dear cousin. I have dreamed that the unlucky Englishman was dead. I cannot recollect whether it was by steel or by poison, only of this I am sure. I have dreamed he was dead, and you know my dreams never deceive me. Be assured, then, of seeing me soon return. Capital! Cried Athos. You are the king of poets, my dear Aramis. You speak like the apocalypse, and you are as true as the gospel. There is nothing now to do but to put the address to this letter. That is easily done, said Aramis. He folded the letter fancifully, and took up his pen and wrote, To Mademoiselle Michon, seamstress, Tours. The three friends looked at one another and laughed. They were caught. Now, said Aramis, you will please to understand, gentlemen, that Bazin alone may carry this letter to Tours. My cousin knows nobody but Bazin, and places confidence in nobody but him. Any other person would fail. Besides, Bazin is ambitious and learned. Bazin has read history, gentlemen. He knows that Sixtus V became pope after having kept pigs. Well, as he means to enter the church at the same time as myself, he does not despair of becoming pope in his turn, or at least a cardinal. You can understand that a man who has such views will never allow himself to be taken, or, if taken, will undergo martyrdom rather than speak. Very well, said D'Artagnan. I consent to Bazin with all my heart. But grant me Planchet. Milady had him one day turned out of doors with sundry blows of a good stick to accelerate his motions. Now, Planchet has an excellent memory, and I will be bound that sooner than relinquish any possible means of vengeance, he will allow himself to be beaten to death. If your arrangements at Tours are your arrangements, Aramis, those of London are mine. I request, then, that Planchet may be chosen, more particularly as he has already been to London with me, and knows how to speak correctly. London, sir, if you please, and my master, Lord D'Artagnan. With that, you may be satisfied. He can make his way, both going and returning. In that case, said Athos. Planchet must receive 700 livres for going, and 700 livres for coming back. And Bazin, 300 for going, and 300 for returning. That will reduce the sum to 5,000 livres. We will each take 1,000 to be employed as seems good, and we will leave a fund of 1,000 under the guardianship of Monsieur Abbe here, for extraordinary occasions or common wants. Will that do? My dear Athos, said Aramis, you speak like Nestor, who was, as everyone knows, the wisest among the Greeks. Well then, said Athos, it is agreed. Planchet and Bazin will go. Everything considered, I am not sorry to retain Grimaud. He is accustomed to my ways, and I am particular. Yesterday's affair must have shaken him a little. His voyage would upset him quite. Planchet was sent for, and instructions were given him. The matter had been named to him by D'Artagnan, who, in the first place, pointed out the money to him, then the glory, and then the danger. I will carry the letter in the lining of my coat, said Planchet. And if I am taken, I will swallow it. Well, but then you will not be able to fulfill your commission, said D'Artagnan. You will give me a copy this evening, which I shall know by heart tomorrow. D'Artagnan looked at his friends as if to say, well, what did I tell you? Now, continued he, addressing Planchet, you have 8 days to get an interview with Lord de Winter. You have 8 days to return. In all 16 days. If, on the 16th day after your departure, at 8 o'clock in the evening you are not here, no money, even if it be but 5 minutes past 8. Then, monsieur, said Planchet, you must buy me a watch. Man's got a point. Take this, said Athos, with his usual careless generosity, giving him his own, and be a good lad. Remember, if you talk, if you babble, if you get drunk, you risk your master's head, who has so much confidence in your fidelity, and who answers for you. But remember also, that if by your fault any evil happens to D'Artagnan, I will find you, wherever you may be, for the purpose of ripping up your belly. Oh, monsieur, said Planchet, humiliated by the suspicion, and moreover, terrified of the calm air of the musketeer. And I, said Porthos, rolling his large eyes, remember, I will skin you alive. Ah, monsieur! And I, said Aramis with his soft, melodious voice, remember that I will roast you at a slow fire. Savage. Oh, monsieur! Planchet began to weep. We will not venture to say whether it was from terror, created by the threats, or from tenderness at seeing 4 friends so closely united. D'Artagnan took his hand. See, Planchet, said he, these gentlemen only say this out of affection for me, but at bottom they all like you. Ah, monsieur, said Planchet, I will succeed, or I will consent to be cut in quarters, and if they do cut me in quarters, be assured that not a morsel of me will speak. It was decided that Planchet should set out the next day at 8 o'clock in the morning, in order, as he had said, that he might, during the next night, learn the letter by heart. He gained just 12 hours by this engagement. He was to be back on the 16th day by 8 o'clock in the evening. In the morning, as he was mounting his horse, D'Artagnan, who felt at the bottom of his heart a partiality for the Duke, took Planchet aside. Listen, said he to him, when you have given the letter to Lord de Winter, and he has read it, you will further say to him, watch over his grace Lord Buckingham, for they wish to assassinate him. But this, Planchet, is so serious and important that I have not informed my friends that I would entrust the secret to you. And, for a captain's commission, I would not write it. Be satisfied, monsieur, said Planchet. You shall see if confidence can be placed in me. Mounted on an excellent horse, which he was to leave at the end of 20 leagues in order to take the post, Planchet set off at a gallop, his spirits little depressed by the triple promise made him by the musketeers, but otherwise as light-hearted as possible. Bazin set out the next day for Tours. and was allowed 8 days for performing his commission. The four friends, during the period of these 2 absences, as may well be supposed, the eye on the watch, the nose to the wind, and the ear on the hark, their days were passed in endeavoring to catch all that was said, in observing the proceeding of the cardinal, and in looking out for all the couriers who arrived. More than once, an involuntary trembling seized them when called upon for some unexpected service. They had, besides, to look constantly to their own proper safety. Milady was a phantom which, when it had appeared to people, did not allow them to sleep very quietly. On the morning of the 8th day, Bazin, fresh as ever and smiling, according to custom, entered the cabaret of the Parpalio, as the four friends were sitting down at breakfast, saying, as had been agreed upon, "Monsieur Aramis, the answer from your cousin." The four friends exchanged a joyful glance. Half of the work was done. It is true, however, that it was the shorter and easier part. Aramis, blushing in spite of himself, took the letter, which was in a large, coarse hand, and not particular for its orthography. "Good God!" cried he, laughing. "I quite despair of my poor Michon. She will never write like Monsieur de Vautrin." What does you mean by beau Michon?" said the Swiss, who was chatting with the four friends when the letter came. "Oh, pardieu! Less than nothing," said Aramis. "A charming little seamstress whom I love dearly, and from whose hand I requested a few lines as a sort of keepsake." "The devil!" said the Swiss. "If she is as great a lady as her writing is large, you are a lucky fellow, comrade." Aramis read the letter and passed it to Athos. "See what she writes to me, Athos," said he. Athos cast a glance over the epistle, and to disperse all the suspicions that might have been created, read aloud, "My cousin, my sister and I are skillful in interpreting dreams, and even entertain great fear of them. But of yours, it may be said, I hope every dream is an illusion. Adieu. Take care of yourself, and act so that we may from time to time hear you spoken of. Marie Michon." "And what dream does she mean?" asked the dragoon, who had approached during the reading. "Yes, what's the dream?" said the Swiss. "Well, pardieu," said Aramis, "it was only this. I had a dream, and I related it to her." "Yes, yes," said the Swiss. "It's simple enough to tell a dream, but I never dream." "You are very fortunate," said Athos, rising. "I wish I could say as much." "Never," replied the Swiss, enchanted like a man like Athos could envy him anything. "Never, never." It's killing me too, honestly. D'Artagnan, seeing Athos rise, did likewise, took his arm, and went out. Porthos and Aramis remained behind to encounter the jokes of the dragoon and the Swiss. As to Bazin, he went and lay down on a truss of straw, and, as he had more imagination than the Swiss, he dreamed that Aramis, having become Pope, adorned his head with the cardinal's hat. But, as we have said, Bazin had not, by his fortunate return, removed more than a part of the uneasiness which weighed upon the four friends. The days of expectation are long, and D'Artagnan, in particular, would have wagered that the days were 44 hours. He forgot the necessary slowness of navigation. He exaggerated to himself the power of Milady. He credited this woman, who appeared to him the equal of a demon, with agents as supernatural as herself. At the least noise, he imagined himself about to be arrested, and that Planchet was being brought back to be confronted with himself and his friends. Still further, his confidence in the worthy Picard, at one time so great, diminished day by day. This anxiety became so great that it even extended to Aramis and Porthos. Athos alone remained unmoved, as if no danger hovered over him, and as if he breathed his customary atmosphere. On the 16th day, in particular, these signs were so strong in D'Artagnan and his two friends that they could not remain quiet in one place, and wandered about like ghosts on the road by which Planchet was expected. "Really," said Athos to them, "you are not men but children, to let a woman terrify you so. And what does it amount to, after all? To be imprisoned? Well, when we should be taken out of prison, Madame Bonacieux is released. To be decapitated? Why, every day in the trenches we go cheerfully to expose ourselves to worse than that. For a bullet may break a leg, and I am convinced a surgeon would give us more pain in cutting off a thigh than an executioner in cutting off a head. Wait quietly, then. In 2 hours, in 4, in 6 hours at latest, Planchet will be here. He promised to be here, and I have very great faith in Planchet, who appears to me to be a very good lad." "But if he does not come," said D'Artagnan. "Well, if he does not come, it will be because he has been delayed, that's all. He may have fallen from his horse, he may have caught a caper from the deck, he may have travelled so fast against the wind as to have brought on a violent catarrh. Ah, gentlemen, let us reckon upon accidents. Life is a chaplet of little miseries, which the philosopher counts with a smile. Be philosophers, as I am, gentlemen. Sit down at the table and let us drink. Nothing makes the future look so bright as surveying it through a glass of Chambertin." "That's all very well," replied D'Artagnan, "but I am tired of fearing when I open a fresh bottle that the wine may come from the cellar of Milady." "You are very fastidious," said Athos. "Such a beautiful woman." "Woman of mark," said Porthos with his loud laugh. Athos started, passed his hand over his brow to remove the drops of perspiration that burst forth, and rose in his turn with a nervous movement he could not repress. The day, however, passed away, and the evening came on slowly, but finally it came. The bars were filled with drinkers. Athos, who had pocketed his share of the diamond, seldom quit the Parpaillot. He had found in Monsieur de Busigny, who, by the by, had given them a magnificent dinner, a partner worthy of his company. They were playing together as usual when 7 o'clock sounded. The patrol was heard passing to double the posts. At 7:30, the retreat was sounded. "We are lost," said D'Artagnan in the ear of Athos. "You mean to say we have lost," said Athos, quietly drawing 4 pistoles from his pocket and throwing them upon the table. "Come, gentlemen," said he. "They are beating the tattoo. Let us to bed." And Athos went out of the Parpaillot, followed by D'Artagnan. Aramis came behind, giving his arm to Porthos. Aramis mumbled verses to himself, and Porthos, from time to time, pulled a hair or two from his moustache, in sign of despair. But all at once, a shadow appeared in the darkness, the outline of which was familiar to D'Artagnan, and a well-known voice said, "Monsieur, I have brought your cloak. It is chilly this evening." "Planchet!" cried D'Artagnan, beside himself with joy. "Planchet!" repeated Aramis and Porthos. "Well, yes, Planchet to be sure," said Athos. "What is there so astonishing in that? He promised to be back by 8 o'clock, and 8 is striking. Bravo, Planchet! You are a lad of your word, and if ever you leave your master, I will promise you a place in my service." "Oh, no, never," said Planchet. "I will never leave Monsieur D'Artagnan." At the same time, D'Artagnan felt that Planchet slipped a note into his hand. D'Artagnan felt a strong inclination to embrace Planchet, as he had embraced him on his departure, but he feared lest this mark of affection, bestowed upon his lackey in the open street, might appear extraordinary to passers-by, and he restrained himself. "I have the note," said he to Athos and his friends. "That's well," said Athos. "Let us go home and read it." The note burned the hand of D'Artagnan. He wished to hasten their steps, but Athos took his arm and passed it under his own, and the young man was forced to regulate his pace by that of his friend. At length, they reached the tent, lit a lamp, and while Planchet stood at the entrance, that the four friends might not be surprised, D'Artagnan, with a trembling hand, broke the seal and opened the so anxiously expected letter. It contained half a line, in a hand perfectly British, and with a conciseness as perfectly Spartan. Thank you. Be easy. D'Artagnan translated this for the others. Athos took the letter from the hands of D'Artagnan, approached the lamp, set fire to the paper, and did not let go till it was reduced to a cinder. Then, calling Planchet, he said, "Now, my lad, you may claim your 700 livres, but you did not run much risk with such a note as that." "I am not to blame for having tried every means to compress it," said Planchet. "Well," said D'Artagnan, "tell us about it." "Damn, that's a long job, monsieur." "You are right, Planchet," said Athos. "Besides, the tattoo has been sounded, and we should be observed if we kept a light burning much longer than the others." "So be it," said D'Artagnan. "Go to bed, Planchet, and sleep soundly." "My faith, monsieur, that will be the first time I have done so for 16 days. "And me too, said Porthos. "And me too," said Aramis. "Well, if you will have the truth, and me too," said Athos. And that brings us to the end of chapter 48. All right, well, it is probably a little bit late to be starting up another chapter. All the nonsense with the fly definitely ate into a little bit of our time. So we'll put a bookmark here, and we will resume next time from chapter 49. We are right about at the 75% mark. We are making very good progress. I'm enjoying the pacing of the book so far. And it's got its ups and downs. In this last session, it was pretty much either all action or all intrigue the whole time. So it's a very good vibe as we're following through. So yeah, I'm having fun with this one. This is definitely the longest book we've read so far, but I'll admit it doesn't really feel it, if you know what I mean. Like, we're having a good time. Each of the sessions there's things going on. There's not really a whole lot of exposition and setting of stage. That was, even from the first reading, there wasn't really much of that going on. Yeah, exactly. It really works well for this format. The limited cast mean I can ham it up a little bit, give some different characterization to the different Musketeers. There's action in just about every chapter. The length of the chapters is very manageable, so it just works out really well. So it doesn't feel quite as long as it could. This is one that we probably could break up into, like, running 2 books concurrently and having, like, some on Tuesdays and Fridays and others on Saturdays and Sundays. But right now I'm happy with the keeping it all together. I'm glad you're enjoying that, because there are certain characters that are just, like, fun to read out. The Swiss, that was, like, accidental, but the translator basically put a German accent on the translated French for the Swiss. So it just sort of comes out. So the Swiss is great. That was an easy one to just fall right into. And just the Musketeers each were, pretty well established. There's the right from the get-go, I kind of settled on a voice for each of them, and it's worked out pretty well. Although I will say, Porthos hurts when he says more than a few lines at a time. The sort of gravelly grumble that he gets is at the lower end of my range on some of those. All right. So, let's see. For the rest of this week, I think we should be good for readings as scheduled for Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But I will say that I am going to Gen Con this weekend. I've got a 4-day pass. So that'll be, my days will be busy on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But my evenings should be free. So I may be a little tired, but I think we should be able to go as scheduled. So that'll be fun, fun to do. Get in and see some good games and some good, have some adventures of my own. But we'll still be getting home just in time to get back to some reading. So I think we should be good. I need to look up and see if there are any good panels or things going on at Gen Con that I should stop in at. Otherwise, I'll just be wandering the floor and seeing the artists and the different displays and things going on. It's always good fun, but yeah. But I think that should wrap us up for the evening and set the tone for the rest of the week. So, I'm lucky to be within, it's only like a half-hour drive or so, 45-minute to the convention center for Gen Con. So I try to go every few years at least. I think the last time I went was at the trail end of COVID, so it was all still very much a kind of touch and go there. It was still on, but it was still all masked up, required vaccinations, that sort of thing. So this will be the first time I'll have gone in a while, and it'll be fully unmasked, which actually, now that I'm thinking about it, the masks probably did wonders for toning down the smell, and I might miss them. Because there is a certain funk with all cons, as we all are aware. You cram that many people into a single fest, it's gonna be bad. Oh yeah, so that could be fun. Yeah, OrCon, MagFest, Comic-Con, yeah, there's a lot going on there. There's a few in this area, because I'm like in driving distance to a few major centers. So it's relatively nice to be able to have that as sort of a day trip, but it's such a hullabaloo and hubbub to get your passes and all. Luckily, with this one being so close, I was able to get a full weekend pass, so that's nice. And not have to worry about a hotel. That's always the worst part, get a hotel fare for a con. But people do it all the time. They come in from way out of town, so especially to host the events. Yeah, I understand. This is definitely the time where I'm mostly surrounded, I will be around more people this coming weekend than I have probably combined over the last 2 years. So it is what it is. It's the last time I went, it was definitely jam-packed in like sardines when you're in the peak of it. There's personal space, no, that doesn't exist. You're lucky if you can have room to stretch your elbows. On the bright side, I'm kind of a big guy, just imposing enough that people will give me space if I look at them a little sour. But it's fun. It should be fun. I'm looking forward to it nonetheless. I'm more of a homebody than not, but it is nice to get out and just see what's going on. It's especially something like Gen Con. I enjoy the board games. I enjoy the tabletop games a lot. And this is the biggest con for those just in the country. So able to see classic board games that I grew up with getting remastered, seeing new things coming out, seeing various card games, and then just the wonderful people that are running the booths selling art or prints or just odds and ends. And really just seeing all the people come together that are enthusiastic for the hobby. I know, right? It's crazy. I keep it so well hidden. All right. Well, with that, with a little bit of yap, we have stretched this out to 10. I am enjoying having the little clock we have on screen now. I put it up for the our marathon, so we kind of get a timetable on it, but I kind of like it. Pathfinder's good. I did that because that Pathfinder felt like D&D 3.75, like the spiritual successor to 3.5. Because we don't talk about 4th edition, and 5th was good, but it was just so far. It took so long to come out. I used to do, yeah. I used to do, was it the Pathfinder Society? I think it was, where it was the basically pickup groups at LGS. That was a lot of fun. Able to, I think it capped out at like level 5 or something like that. So you didn't really get too far in on any character, but it was a good way to meet people that were playing and maybe leverage that into getting a campaign going on the side. And if nothing else, it was just, fun. Good way to break into it. Because it can definitely be hard to start games, especially if you don't know a lot of people around. So those sort of things. I know D&D used to do that too. They had adventure sessions or whatever. Oh yeah, second was, it's yeah, Pathfinder 2nd. I haven't actually picked up a rulebook for that. I've heard it's solid, and because the 1st edition definitely felt like it was riffing off of D&D, not riffing. But the 2nd is, I mean, they built their own thing. It was well established. They were able to put their own thing together. That's the big thing. Having a set group is really how it all works. Oh, is it? That's kind of nice. I'll need to look into that. I do still, I have my good old hardcover Pathfinder book, but those are nice to have and just leaf through every once in a while, but it'll be nice to browse through the 2nd ed. When I was going, the last time I was at Gen Con actually was when they were getting ready to release, I think it was in beta, Pathfinder 2nd ed. So it was a whisper on the winds at the time. So it's been a little bit longer than I think now. It's probably been about, what, 3 years since that came out? Time just blends together, doesn't it? Oh, that's interesting. I don't know if I've ever played Starfighter or really heard anybody playing it. That's essentially like it's a space-based Pathfinder format. So yeah, it could be fun. It's nice that sort of, a lot of the game frameworks, they may be set in fantasy, but they lend themselves very easily into a semi-quasi homebrew of any situation or setting you can think of. But having one that is official and well-balanced for your specific brand that you're looking for is pretty nice. So it takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. Like, oh, is this broken or not? Well, it's in the book. It's probably fine. Oh, right, Minnie. Yeah. Yeah. Their D20 Modern was... It was something, that's for sure. Have you seen anything about the, I think, was it Daggerheart? The ones from the guys at Critical Role they're putting out? It's a new framework to be a competitor to D&D, Pathfinder, etc. Just a sort of a third player. From what I heard, it's using a 2d12 system as opposed to a d20 system. But it seems to be more roleplay focused as opposed to what D&D has become, where ostensibly it's supposed to be roleplay focused or roleplay / combat focused, but everybody knows that D&D tends to fall into sort of just dungeon crawlers and combat. It really depends on your play group, but it usually becomes a lot more combat focused. Yeah. It can be fun. I think that it depends very much on the groups, because a lot of groups and a lot of players thrive in the more structured form of a combat focus. Roleplay is not for everybody. Some people that's their strong point, and some people it's not. And so it really puts a lot of effort on the DM and the individual players to be able to tell the stories when you're into a big roleplay environment. And yeah, D&D lends itself to being a goblin whacking simulator, which is a lot of fun. People enjoy that. But if you're trying to tell stories, it's very easy to fall into the comfort of old habits of just whacking goblins. Yep. But it's interesting. Hopefully it puts pressure on wizards to maybe do better, be less greedy, we can hope, and get a product that's out that's not ridiculously obscenely expensive and just bloated. Who am I kidding? But more competition in the arena, in the space, is to be welcomed, especially from an established brand like the guys at Critical Role. They did a lot to push that into, if not the mainstream, into general awareness. Yeah, exactly. That's laughable. The theater kids well, okay, I won't say the theater kids started it. It started with the war reenactors that wanted a platform for the rules. At the very beginning, it was Gygax started it as a combat simulator, and then everything else went outside it. But that very quickly spun on its head and became roleplay first. So the theater kids owned D&D for 3 generations. 2 generations. 3. It's been a while. So people who complain about that can get over themselves. All right, I think that is a wonderful spot to wrap up for the evening. So we should expect to be back on Friday for our normal schedule. We will continue with the Three Musketeers. I'd like to thank you again for joining us on last Saturday for our big marathon stream. It was a whole lot of fun. I will find a time. That stream was not archived, but I do have the recording. So at some point, I'll go ahead and set that up on a rebroadcast, just so that we've got something going on the channel on an off day, just to keep things busy and to let people know that we do fun things every once in a while. But I'm not sure of a schedule on that. We'll see. As far as other future marathons or long streams of the like, given the spacing of things, we may do it twice a year or so. I'm thinking anniversary in January and birthday half Annie on Yeah, man. In July is great. And yeah, the cat zoomies, they get bored. They wonder what I was doing for 10 hours. I wondered what I was doing for 10 hours. You get to a point where you start to question life choices when, the voice starts to go. But I'd do it again at a heartbeat. It was a whole lot of fun. So we'll see if we have any other opportunities to have sort of events like that in the future. Things that we want to read, things that would be fun. One of these days, maybe we'll pull out like the Princess Bride or something, or it's like anything like that. Random books that are just like sound fun. And those will, by necessity, need to be unarchived because we don't have the rights to those. Weep, weep, weep. But yeah, so thank you again for joining us. It was a lot of fun. And we'll look forward to regular activities from now on until we decide to do something else fun. All right. I'm going to keep talking if I let myself, so let's go ahead and call it an evening. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. I hope you had a good time, and we will be back on Friday for our continued reading of the Three Musketeers. Until then, thank you, and good night.